Hello, this is my unboxing, review, and guide on how to program your Inovelli Smart 2-1 switch. I don't know how to say that. The Inovelli Smart 2-1 switch is part of Inovelli's Blue Series, which instead of using Z-Wave like they do for all their Red Series switches, the Blue Series switches uses Zigbee. The Inovelli switches are very configurable and provide lots of options for the home automation enthusiast, which I assume you are if you're watching this video. Inovelli states that there are approximately 60 different parameters on this switch, making it one of the most customizable switches out there. First, we need to install the switch. Here we have typical electrical box. You have the neutral coming in, the white, which is usually all clustered together. And then you have a line, which is the actual electricity coming into the box. And then that will usually go through a switch and then to the load. Here is the load for the bathroom lights that I'm looking to control. So I have a particular special case because I'm using Philips Hue light bulbs. What the Philips Hue light bulbs need is constant power. So that's called a smart light, but I'll get into that in a minute. This is how I have it wired. I have the line coming in and the load coming out, which I could have tied this to the line and that would have provided continuous power to the Philips Hue, but I wanted to leave this able to go back to, I don't know, a regular light bulb, a normal light bulb. If I took out the Philips Hue and put in regular light bulbs, I'd want to use this as a switch. So I wired it correctly, meaning that I put the load on the load side and I put the line in the line and the neutral in the neutral. So this is wired correctly. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the switch that it's a smart switch, rather that the light bulb is a smart light bulb, and then the switch will run power to the light bulb all the time and ignore the fact that it's on and off, bypassing the switch itself, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Hopefully that made some sense. So in the instruction manual, it tells you to hold A or the up and then press this 4 times. So up, 1, 2, 3, 4. This will turn yellow and then you let go. And now it will send continuous power to the load so that your Philips Hue bulbs are always powered and will be able to respond to commands regardless of the setting of this switch. Now, to get the switch to actually control the lights, well, that's going to require some automation. I could bind the switch directly to the Philips Hue bulbs, which gives you a solid and reliable way of controlling Hue lights, but this breaks the binding to the Philips Hue hub. And I really like the Hue app, and so do other people who live in my home, so I can't bind the lights directly to the switch. I want to use the Inovelli switch as a Zigbee controller to control the Hue lights, so I will need to create an automation for this. Pairing this device to Zigbee2MQTT is pretty simple. Powering up my switch for the first time, you can see that it goes through a series of colors first, and then settles in on a flashing blue light, indicating that it's ready to be paired. Using Zigbee2MQTT, I click Permit Join to allow the device to join my network. And it should now allow new devices to join. Hey, there we go. Looks like a new device has appeared. And now we're just waiting for it to configure itself. Okay. All right, it shows up as an Inovelli 2-in-1 switch and dimmer. All right, so we're going to rename that to Inovelli Test Switch. All right, so here are the setup instructions for the switch. And it tells you basically that if you want to see the parameters in Zigbee, then you want to go to Zigbee. You want to click on the switch and then go to Exposes, and you can see there's the switch. Here are different effects. So let's see, fast blink. Let's make that last 10 seconds, and let's change the color to that. Let's make it really bright. Wow. Let's do LED 1. Let's do a fast blink, and let's have it last for 2 seconds. Guess I have to put something here. So let's put 128, 128, or 64, I guess. No, that's good enough. Okay, so that's LED 1. All right, that's cool. What I would do is go to the logbook, and if you isolate it down to what you want to be looking at, this way you don't get overwhelmed with log entries from everywhere else. Now I can do all the different actions. So for example, if I hit the config button, you could see changed to config single, or if I hit the up, that is the up single, you can see that here, or I can up double, or I can up triple, or I can up quintuple. So all of these possibilities are, of course, are options for the up, the down, and the config button. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is a down quintuple, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a config quintuple. Okay, so those are all your basic options. So you have up, down, and config. You also have one other option where you could press and hold, and that is the up held. And when I release, that is the up release. Now, of course, that is also available for the down as well. So down held and down release. Okay, so you can see that this is what we want to be listening for in any kind of automation. So let's go ahead and create an automation here. And for the trigger, I want the Inovelli test switch. And I want to listen for an up single. Let's say I want to turn on the light. All right, if that up single happens, then turn on the light. Device action barn. Okay, so I want to turn on the barn when I get an up single action from the Inovelli test switch. All right, so if I single press the up, there it goes. You can see it was triggered. You can see the light went on. And now you would think, well, I need to turn it off. Now, let me show you what to do here. So what you want to do is you want to keep everything in one automation. So I'm going to call this up single. And for the action, I'm actually going to create a choose. If I use a choose, then I can say triggered by up single, and then turn on the light. So barn room light on, save, and then I'm going to create another option. Well, first I need another trigger. So let's add another trigger, device Inovelli test switch, and this time we're going to go down single, and I'm going to edit the ID, down single, and then for the options I want to add another option. I'm going to add another option, and the condition is triggered by down single. The action is going to be barn room, turn off barn room. Okay, so here is our up single, down single, and then we choose between two actions. The first action is if I press up single, turn on the barn light, and if I press down single, turn off the barn light. All right, let's see if this works. Press down, press up, and there is your basic functionality. Okay, so now let's say I wanted to do more than that, because we have all these options, right? Well, let me just jump ahead to something I've already created. So first of all, let's disable what I just created right now. And let's re-enable the one that I had already created. And let's take a look at that. So in this one I have, if you press the config button once, twice, or 3 times, if you press the up paddle once, or down paddle once, and up double, down double, I also have the up held, down held, up release, and down release. And each of these has a trigger ID, so that when I get to the options, I could use the trigger ID to trigger the different options. So for example, if I press single up, turn on the light, down, turn turn off the light. If I hit the config once, recall a Philips Hue scene. So this is a Philips Hue bulb. So I have a scene called bright, and that actually gives me a nice incandescent light. And then I have another scene called daylight that gives me daylight colored light. And that's if I hit config double, and if I hit config triple, then just make the light red. I don't know, I ran out of creativity on that one. So let's go ahead and test that. So if I single press config, I get incandescent. If I double tap, I get daylight. And if I triple tap, I get red light. Now, I don't know if it appears red because it's probably blinding, but it is red. Also, I have the single tap off and the single tap on. So those are all the automations that I've shown you already. Now, the question is, what happens if I were to turn the light off remotely and not using the switch? Would the switch light, would the LED indicator on the switch turn off? And actually the answer is no. Now, it did for me because I have these two triggers that if the barn light goes on or if the barn light goes off, meaning that should anyone from anywhere turn on the light, whether it's using the switch or not, then I want that switch to follow. When triggered by light turned on, turn on the switch. And if triggered by light turned off, then turn off the switch. And all that means is that if I turn on the light from somewhere else, then the LED bar on the light switch goes on. And if I turn it off from somewhere else, then the LED bar on the light switch goes off. Now, I have one more thing that I wanted to do, and I wanted to be able to dim the light. Now, I really did play around with different options on this, and you can play around all you want. And if you set up any kind of loop action, you're going to be very disappointed. And what I came up with is, what I want to do is I want to be able to set the dim on the switch, and then when I let go of the button, I want the light bulb to follow. So again, I want to be able to set this bar on the light switch to where I want it to be. And then when I let go, I want the light bulb to follow. This, to me, is the best option out of all the different options that I tried. I tried setting up a loop where if you press and hold the button, the light gets brighter and brighter. And then when you let go, it stops getting brighter. Well, let me tell you, all of those, they suck. They don't work, they're aggravating, and you will just be like banging your head against the wall. So you can do that if you want. If you like to bang your head against the wall, feel free. I'm going to suggest that you simply look at the light switch, and whatever the value of the light switch is, make the light bulb match the light switch. Let me show you how to do that. We are going to set up a trigger, and this trigger basically says that if the switch does something, and let's take a look at the YAML. So if that switch does anything, then the trigger ID local dimming, if anything happens to the switch, it'll trigger that action. So what I need to do is have a further condition that limits this to only when you change the brightness value. So if I go down to where that trigger actually happens, so when triggered by local dimming, meaning that when this trigger is triggered, then as a further condition, make sure that the light is changing. Then what I would need to do is take the brightness of the switch and pipe that into the brightness of the light, the actual light bulb that I'm turning on. Now I know it says light.backyard here. That is the barn light. It's just named this way in the config. That is actually the barn light. So take the brightness from the switch and apply it to the light. So that's what option 8 is here. So let me show you how that works. If I were to press and hold, make the light a little bit brighter, then you see the light matches the value shown on the dimmer. And if I make it super bright, the light matches. Now, the nice thing about this is that it doesn't change the color of the light. the light is still red. And I could dim, and I could brighten. Now another cool thing, if I turn the switch off, and I turn it back on, it goes back to the dim value that it was before. So that's nice too, I like that. It doesn't go, 100% every time you turn it back on. Same thing here, if I make it really bright, turn it off, turn it back on, it goes back to the same color and same brightness it was before because it's following the brightness that the switch was. Now let's go ahead and set this light to daylight, so I'm gonna double tap. And let's dim it, press and hold, let go. The light will now dim to match the dimmer. Now, if you want to have better control over the dimming, I would recommend that you change the dimming speed up local and the dimming speed down local. I have it set to 25. You could do 20 or 25, I find is a good speed. And that's what I would recommend. That slows down the rate of the speed of the dimming up and down. I only have one more thing I want to add to this, and that is I want to have the option to make it full bright, and I want to have an option to make it like a night light, not completely off, but a little bit dim. Okay, the up double and the down double, I use those triggers to trigger two more actions here, and I use the turn on call service, and then I tell it specifically that room, not the particular light bulb, but the room itself. So Hue has rooms, and so I'm using the room, even though the room has only one light bulb, but pretend. Let's just pretend. And I tell it to go to the brightness value of 255. And then for the other one, if I double tap down, then I tell the same thing, call service, turn on, choose the light I want to affect, and I tell the brightness to drop to 16. So let's go ahead and see how that works. I'm going to double tap up. The light is now at full brightness, and I'm going to double tap down. And the light is now 16 in 255 world. I believe that concludes all of the different ways you can configure the light switch in Home Assistant. All right, here's what's inside an Inovelli 2-1 switch, and also how to fix the ground plug issue. So first of all, we're going to take apart, squeeze here and here, and then you'll see these little tabs will pop out. Pull the air gap switch. Okay, and once you do that, this whole piece will come off. All right, so what do we got inside? We got the down, the up, the config buttons. Here you can see the LEDs. Very cool. Now let's take this thing apart. Okay, so let me show you the actual issue that I'm trying to fix. If you look in here, this is the ground plug. Now the way it should work is the plate goes back and forth when you tighten and loosen the screw. So if I loosen the red screw, the plate comes toward the screw when I tighten the screw, right? Okay, that makes sense. You put the wire in there, you tighten it, and it grabs the wire. The problem with the ground screw is the plate is stuck in the closed position. So if you try to open it, well, it just worked because I took the front off. But normally that plate, before I took the front off, the plate was stuck in the up position and it wouldn't go down. So when it doesn't come down, when you loosen the screw, you can't put the wire in. The wire just goes underneath the plate and then you can't tighten it. So the solution to that apparently is to take the front off, and you don't need to take the switch apart. I just now learned that. But let's go ahead. I already unloosened all the screws here. Okay, so there is the screw terminals for all the other wires. And then if I turn this over, I'm just going to hold the screws in. Here is the other side. And voila, there you go. All right. And then at this point, this ground plate should then come loose and fall down. So you want it to be in this down position when you put it back together. There are your LEDs. There are your 3 switches. That's got to be the antenna. Yeah, you definitely want to get the antenna outside of this metal cage. So yeah, I'm going to say that's the antenna. All right, so that is the inside of an Inovelli 2-1 switch. You're welcome.